had the privilege of interviewing Dr. Néstor Espinoza, a Latin scientist from Chile who, in addition to being very young and super nice, is dedicated to the study of planets beyond our solar system, a topic of great interest today. But in this occasion, besides talking about his science, I also wanted to talk about his career, what inspired him, and how from Chile to Baltimore, Maryland, now he's the leader of the group in charge of exoplanetary science at the Space Telescope Science Institute. His story is very interesting and might seem quite familiar to many, especially boys and girls who are now studying high school or at the university. And I hope that knowing about Nestor's career inspires anyone who has the audacity to hold to their dreams and make what might now seem impossible a reality.
Thank you so much for being here with me.
Thank you for inviting me to this, Tracy. An honor.
Well, one question, I know you are from Chile. I'm very interested to know how you decided to study astronomy. What motivated you to study astronomy?
Yeah, so for astronomy, it was not an eureka moment as one typically sees in the movies. The reality of things is that I wanted to be many things as I was a kid. I wanted to be a lawyer at some point. I wanted to be a professional hockey player at some other point. Actually, well into my high school years, I wanted to be an electric guitar interpreter, which is very, very interesting.
What is that?
I was very close to being that. So it's basically a person that just, it's an expert interpreting music with the electric guitar. So playing like a rock star, basically.
Okay.
But in a more professional manner. So it's a career. You can do a career as an in music. But mainly because I didn't exactly know what you could do in general, what was possible for a Chilean like myself to do. I was always certainly interested on science and doing science. And I remember my first course on physics in high school was absolutely mind-blowing. It was something that was from the get-go something that I found very magical. The process of doing this, that you could predict movement of things with mathematics, was absolutely fantastic. But I also thought that science was something that was done in the movies by somebody else, like at NASA or something like that. I never thought, like me as a Chilean, I could actually study that. Even less being paid to do science. That sounded completely nuts to me. But then my physics teacher, I remember midway through high school, asked me what I wanted to do. And I was like, well, something sciencey, maybe engineering. I know that's something like common that people do, and in Chile at least. And then she mentioned to me that there was also the possibility, and it was a career choice, to do science, to actually be a scientist, do research, and be paid to do research. And I thought she was joking at first. It's like, who's going to pay you to do research? She was like, yeah, that happens. That happens in universities and institutes. And you could be one of them. And there's careers here in Chile that allow you to do that. And that completely changed my perspective. Like, that's exactly what I want to do. It sounds very magical. And I would love to do that. So I studied hard for my SAT, the analogous to the SAT tests, to get into the university. I didn't do that well. I did okay-ish. I was never like an A+ student or anything like that. I was very average, I would say. But then I got into university, but I wanted to go into astronomy because I found the area just fascinating. But my score was not enough to go into astronomy, so I got into mathematics first. And I thought, like, well, I'll do math, and then I'll change internally to the university to astronomy. Big mistake. It was not as easy as I thought it was going to be. Math is very hard, and especially a career focused on math. In fact, my first semester was pretty bad. Like, I failed almost every course. And the main reason, I think, was that because I was not used to studying as one is used, and as one has to study in university, in a university setting, which is very different to a high school setting. You have to find your own books. You have to figure out how you learn. You have to do it at like a certain pace because exams are coming, and there's no time to learn everything in exquisite detail. Like, you have to be problem-oriented to solve these tests, right? I was not very good at that at the beginning, but then I learned. Through that failure, I also learned, and then the next semester I did excellently on all the courses. Like, I learned my way through it, and then I eventually changed to astronomy. So that's how I started my career in science. It was not, again, an eureka moment or a straight cut. It was like very bumpy, and then I made it.
It just the path took you there.
Exactly. Yeah. Also, not only the path, but also mentors around me, like my physics teacher, for instance, was like one of my main mentors. People in the university that I met, students or professors that were, eager to teach me how to do things. So I never did any of this in isolation. I was very grateful to have people around me that helped me figure it out.
But Chile has a big observatory, the biggest observatory, I think, in the world, of huge telescopes. And did you know about them? Did you get motivated about the telescopes themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I knew about them, that these observatories existed, but it was also very clear to me that these observatories were not Chilean. They were made from other institutions like ESO, the European Southern Observatory had one of these ones, some of these ones, Carnegie Institution for Science, which were like all foreign institutions that come and build their observatories on top. It was not until way into my undergraduate studies that I understood that there was some percentage of the time that goes to Chilean, so to people that are working on Chilean institutions.
Okay.
But other than that, I was not that aware. And I think that's what the average person in Chile really knows about, that there's clear skies, there's nice skies, there's observatories, but then it stops there. Like how people can access that, or if Chileans have any say on that, not really. Yeah.
It is amazing. I think that it would be nice if they have more outreach to talk about the possibilities and get more Chilean people engaged.
Fair enough. I mean, I think there's a fair amount of outreach, like knowing the people that work in those observatories and having worked in the observatories myself. There's for sure a fair amount of outreach, but I think the amount of people working on astronomy, it's way smaller than the huge amount of population that exists in Chile, right? You cannot reach everyone. Not everyone will have the interest on what's going on too. So it's a multifaceted problem. It's like not simply, oh, let's put more funding in outreach and things will work out. There's like many layers to this whole issue. And I was one part of that issue too, right? I didn't know the details and I didn't learn them until when.
So what are you doing about that? I mean, do you bring your knowledge or your experience to people, young people in Chile?
Yeah. So when we try to go yearly to Chile just to visit family, but whenever I do that, I also try to go and speak with people and also give talks to the public, to schools whenever I can. And I love those opportunities because it's really nice to go and give back a little bit of what I've been learning and what I've been able to see through the eyes of different institutions around the world on what astronomy research means and how impactful Chilean observatories are. So I think I think giving back, it's a little bit more than just giving talks, right? So I try to find my way through that, helping in any way I can. But it's a tough problem on its own to actually make everyone aware of what's going on, right?
Something very interesting he shared with me was the great privilege that he received from the Liceo Peñaflor, a middle school in a community at the outer skirts of the capital Santiago de Chile, who recognized his position in the astronomical community and gave his name to the new astronomy room or planetary in their school. During the inauguration, Nestor gave a talk, and he remembers with great pleasure how both children and adults were very happy to hear about his work and what he was doing and planning to do in the future about his new projects.
Then you went into astronomy, and now you work in a very interesting field of astronomy. How you decide that that's what you wanted to do?
Yeah. So while I was an undergrad, when I started studying astronomy, and throughout my life, I think I've always had I've been always very curious about the concept of life elsewhere. In fact, at some point during my early years, I guess, like even before high school, I was very interested in this concept of like aliens and UFOs and stuff like this. But then I quickly realized that all the footage that there was on this and all the details that people spoke about, I didn't really have like a quantifiable measure of understanding how real the thing that I'm seeing on the TV is. So I was always in the lookout of like some area of science that could approach this from like a, kind of a methodological way of doing that. And there was a particular area that caught my attention, which was exoplanets, the study of planets orbiting other stars, stars outside our solar system. And that was extremely fascinating to me. But I also thought that that was like a very far away field that it was very hard for me to reach to. Basically because I was in Chile, and in Chile there's not many people working on exoplanets. It seemed to be like a very hot topic. And to work on hot topics, my thinking was like, well, you really have to be extremely good. And I'm like, I like this thing, but I'm not particularly good compared to my classmates. And I didn't know exactly how to get those opportunities to do that. In my third year in undergrad, I had the opportunity to have a fantastic class, which was called Exoplanets. And I was just fascinated by the thing. It was one of the best classes I had during undergrad. It was taught by a very, very engaging professor too, Andres Jordan, which ended up being my PhD advisor. And I remember finishing that course that I did very well, and then just going to knock on the door of the professor, telling him like, do you have a project that I could work on? And like, I will do it completely free if you want. Like, I'm like available to do this stuff because it's extremely exciting. I would really love to do this. And he was like, yeah, like we have there was an opportunity to be a summer intern that summer. So I started working with him, and it was fantastic by two reasons. So one, working on the thing was just fantastic. The other thing is that it was the first time that I actually got paid to do research.
Oh.
And that first payment on that felt so good.
So great.
So I had the opportunity to work other summers on other stuff. Like I remember working on a call center. I also work on other random jobs. But this is just the best pay I'd ever had. Right?
Yeah.
Like being paid to do research is something that was magical. And since then we started working together since undergrad. It's my third to fourth year. Then I graduated from undergrad, and because of family reasons, and also because I really enjoyed working with Andres, I decided to do a PhD under his supervision in Chile, and that's where my PhD, kind of career started with his supervision. That I think it's good to highlight the fact that I was very lucky to have great mentors, from my physics teacher that taught me that research was a thing, to finding Andres. He's a superb mentor, and to this day we're very good friends. Having this amount of mentorship around you that could really teach you and help you figure out how to move into science, it's something that I'm really, really grateful for. And then I try to keep giving back too, as a researcher right now, with students, not necessarily the ones that work around me, but also abroad, people from Chile, for instance. So I think that's another way of giving back that I really like. When I see that people have opportunities that they can grab and go further in their careers.
Chile is quite recognized by its contributions to astrophysics. There is actually a very strong group of scientists working with the telescopes in radio astronomy, studying the interstellar medium, and also other areas of astronomy. However, exoplanets is a field so new that at the time when Nestor started his career, it included only a small group of scientists working on that field in Chile. But that has changed now.
They've grown significantly since 10, 15 years ago. Which is when I was an undergrad, right? And seeing that growth too has been fantastic to see, and totally deserved too. I mean, doing science in Latin America is extremely hard. Like the funding levels are very, very low with comparison to what one typically gets here in the United States, for instance. Yeah. But still, they manage to do excellent science, which is almost heroic, right? But they make it happen because talent is everywhere. It's not focused on a particular country or in a particular part of the world. Even with little funding, they can generate a ton of science that it's very relevant and very at the top of things. So it's fantastic to see.
That's great. And then now you were from being in Chile, now you are here working at a space telescope. How was that transition to come here to?
Oh, that transition was very, very interesting. Because as I mentioned, I think the main difference between like working in Chile or working here in the United States is not necessarily the talent itself. I see the same talent in Chile than I see in the United States, but it's the scale of things. It's the scale of funding, for instance. It's the scale of what kind of ideas you can bring forward. like the concept, for instance, of bringing a telescope like the James Webb Space Telescope, which is like the craziest idea ever, right? It's like a telescope that has to unfold itself, and you launch it in a rocket. It's like 6.5 meters diameter. That's unthinkable for a small country to do on its own. But here in the United States, you have the opportunity to say that, yes, that's a crazy idea, but we can make it happen. And we made it happen, which is absolutely crazy, right? So it's the scale of what you can accomplish with the number of talented people that are here. It's very diverse too. I think that's a key thing too, because to solve the kind of problems that a telescope, for instance, like the James Webb points you to, you really need a lot of points of view to solve the thing. And it doesn't, like if you have like the same kind of astronomers sitting down on a little table and they're all the same, they won't solve the thing. You need engineers, you need people coming from different parts of the world, you need different points of view on thinking about problems, and things get solved very efficiently like that. So, the scale of also being able to put all those people in a table to work together for years on making something like James Webb happen is something very unique that happens here in the United States. So it's a totally different scale of things that makes you also, it has made me very bold when it comes to pushing ideas forward. I might have crazy ideas,
but
I know that they can happen, right? It's a thing that you can transform, again, from science fiction to science. And here it works.
That's very interesting.
So it's a different way of looking at scientific problems, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that now having James Webb, the possibilities of what you can do in your field of research is open. I mean,
yes, and it has evolved considerably. So, for example, within our group, we're trying to study the atmospheres of worlds that are in the habitable zones. They could maybe host atmospheres like the Earth. We're trying to figure out if that's true, and if they could, they might even have life, right? And then we're trying to investigate those worlds. Right now, it's happening. And the fact that you can be at the forefront of that science, if you asked Nestor from like 10, 15 years ago, that would be magical. Like something that's completely out of reach.
You couldn't do it.
Right. But now it's a reality. It's something that happens, and it's something that I'm very grateful to be able to do. But also it's enabled by the kind of scientific environment that a country like this one allows you to be in.
Yeah, I remember before we didn't think that stars had many planets around. Then Kepler came and started discovering planets like crazy, and we figured out. Then Hubble was able to see some, but then with James Webb, is just looking at the atmospheres and figure out what elements or what molecules.
But not all the work Nestor does at the Space Telescope Science Institute is research. He also works a considerable amount of his time helping other scientists to do their own research.
So my time is divided right into my research, which is like 50% of my time. And the other 50% too is helping the community do their science. So getting scientific products out there from the James Webb or the Hubble that are on par of what they need. So the easier it is for the community to do their science, the more successful we're being at our work, right? And that's also part of my job here. Of course, I don't do this alone. It's impossible for someone like me to do it on its own. We have a wide range of astronomers over here that are experts on their particular fields, on exoplanetary science and exoplanet atmospheres, that are doing now an excellent job at bringing all this to the community, right? So it's a team effort. And that's the other beautiful thing of working here at the Space Telescope. So it's the possibility to work with a lot of people, with a lot of very, very clever people that make all of this a reality. So every time a scientist is happy with their data, it is thanks to a broad range of people out here that make that happen. And being part of that team is fantastic. Yeah.
If it weren't because of this group of people, then it would be more difficult for other scientists to be able to extract information important for their science, right?
Exactly. So if we just, it's not just like launching the telescope and then, okay, we'll get the data magically. So suppose you could extract the data from James Webb right now, like the raw data. Analyzing that raw data will take you years of your life just to figure out how to get out what you want. And then if you get what you want, and then there's like a very crazy signal that maybe it's a scientific discovery, confirming that that signal is real, it's going to take you order like 5 years, right? So here at the Institute, we've been working very, very, very hard on getting very nice scientific products out to the community and doing also technical investigations over here to try to figure out if there's something funky with the data. Okay, we know that there's something funky with the data and we can communicate that to the community knows. So they can, you know, do their own research on that or know that we're doing research trying to investigate these issues, right? So this kind of support to these missions is extremely important. It's one of the key things that makes the science happen. Without an institute like this one, we wouldn't have the amazing science that we have.
It would be slow and painful.
Exactly.
And not as productive as is now.
Exactly. That's the other point. So within we're now in the second year of operations, scientific operations with James Webb. And you see a breadth of science in just 2 years that it's fantastic. So for sure, the kind of productivity I think in a high degree is thanks to, you know, institutes like this one, getting that data, getting those data products out there. And it's an amazing group of people that get to work on this. It's software engineers, it's mechanical engineers, it's people that do optics, it's people that understand the instruments, it's people that do the actual software that understand the science behind. So getting all these people in the same institute, it's the key thing, right? All these visions on how this work, it's the key thing to making this happen.
I think that's very important that you mention it because sometimes it's difficult for people to understand what you all are doing here for the community. So just to conclude, what are your projects for the future? What are you looking to do in your science? So what we can expect to learn about the planets beyond?
Yeah, scientifically speaking, I think I have many questions, but I think one of the main questions that I have, especially for those planets that are like small, like our own, like rocky planets orbiting other stars, is whether they have atmospheres or not. So the vast majority of the planets that we know are in what we call the habitable zones of their stars. The vast majority of those orbit what we call M dwarfs. Those are little stars, are like, these are crazy types of stars that are very small, so some of them are even the size of Jupiter. They're very cold, such that if you wanted to feel the same temperature that you would feel here on Earth from these little stars, you have to move closer to them. This is the same thing as a heater. So if you have a big heater like the sun, you're much better far away. But then if that heater just shrinks, you have to get closer to the heater to feel the same heat. So these little M stars, we know rocky planets that orbit them in what we know as the habitable zone. So there are these zones in which if these planets had atmospheres like the Earth, they could have liquid water in their surfaces. But that if they have atmospheres, it's a big if. We don't know. Because maybe because they're closer, maybe these stars, I don't know, they flare, and then these flares can just remove all the atmosphere from these planets for what we know. So we don't really know.
They don't have magnetic fields.
For example, they might not have exactly the kind of protection that we have here on Earth. So a big question right now, that I'm not the only one thinking about this, there's many people who are in the field thinking about this, is like, do these planets have atmospheres or not? Very simple question. And it turns out that you can answer those questions with James Webb. You can answer the question on like a population level even. Do rocky planets orbiting these M stars have atmospheres or not? It's a big question that I think we're going to start, likely getting data on this. We're already starting to get data on this by programs that have been submitted by the community. But there was also a very important team that was put forward by the director of the Space Telescope. They wanted to do a strategic program. They wanted to really use the time on James Webb to answer some of these questions on exoplanetary science. So the director set up a strategic working group to figure out what are the key questions. And this came up as the top question that people want to answer. So this group, they asked for feedback to the scientific community. The scientific community wrote some papers saying like, yes, like the majority of them saying, this is what we need to answer right now. So this group, which I had the privilege of being part of, submitted these recommendations to the director saying like, this is the top question that people want to answer. They proposed a particular study that James Webb could do if the director gave like 500 hours of
Oh.
telescope time, which is a lot of time.
Yeah.
It was a submission again from the community really to the director. But being able to just discuss that as a possibility right now, I think it's a very, very exciting thing. And it's a very exciting time to be alive, right? To be working on this.
Yeah.
To be able to be on the brink of being able to answer those questions. But in the next few years, if that program happened, we could have an answer to that in the coming years, right? Which again seems like, to me, that seemed like a very far away question before the launch of JWST. But now it seems that it's something that we could actually answer. And that is very fascinating.
And yes, people are really looking forward to understand the possibilities, right?
Exactly. And this is not the only program that have been thought on how to do this. There's many other programs from the community, from the scientific community, that already have time. In my group, we also have one of these projects trying to analyze a particular planet in the habitable zone to see if it has an atmosphere. So there's many programs that are trying to answer similar questions. So the fact that that's happening as a community, as a scientific community, that's happening, it's fascinating. So, waiting for answers in the next few years on this question, I think it's a good thing to be aware of and have the eyes very wide open to see what results are going to come out of those studies. It's very, very exciting stuff. Yeah.
That sounds very exciting,
Yeah.
and I'm glad that you are pushing for that, because people are very interested in exoplanets and learn more about them. And I'm glad that we have James Webb and you're working on that. So just keep going.
Yeah, well, thank you. We'll do our best.
Thank you so much for this time. It was an honor, and hopefully we will talk other time more.
Oh yeah, we will. I'm sure we will.
Okay. Thank you.
If you like the information on this channel, please don't forget to subscribe.